The very first camping video I made showed my first attempt at setting up my, at the time, brand new 5-metre bell tent. It was the very first time I'd ever put up a bell tent, and I wanted to show people that even on your first attempt you can do it on your own, and that even if you don't get it right and it's not perfectly pitched, you've still got a tent you can go out and use. But one of the main reasons for starting this channel was to give people hints and tips that I hadn't been able to find when I wanted to. So this video shows me putting up the same 5-metre bell tent in our 4th season of using it. And the emphasis is on the hints and tips, what I do now that I didn't do in the beginning, and many of those hints and tips are related to the fact that I'm putting it up on my own and have found ways to make it easier. So before we get on to the tips, how do you manage your children while you're trying to put up the tent? I have 3 different approaches depending where I am. In some campsites, I will delay putting the tent up and take them to either the playground or the swimming pool to burn off some energy, especially when they've been stuck in a car for a few hours. They're much more willing to play nicely by the tent while I put it up if I've done that. If I can, I book a pitch near a play area so I can supervise them while I'm putting the tent up. That's getting easier as they're a little bit older, of course. The third option is to get them involved in putting the tent up, and some days they absolutely love doing that, and other days they just don't want to know. I leave that choice to them. So my first tip is to always use a footprint. This is a footprint that you can see me laying out here. It is basically a ground sheet. The main benefit most retailers give for a footprint is protecting the bottom of your tent from anything sharp on your pitch, and of course that is very important. But on a practical basis, the best reason for me is that when I pack it away again, the bottom of the tent is clean and weather dependent, may also be dry. Your footprint will never be dry, even in dry weather due to condensation, and it's often also very muddy, which is better than the tent being muddy. Obviously, you want your bell tent to go away dry whenever possible, and if it's not dry when you put it away, you're going to have to get it out and dry it. Your footprint can go away wet, and you can dry that much more easily because it's just a sheet, and it's a tarpaulin, so it's not going to go mouldy. Next up is the way you fold your bell tent. I always fold it the same way, and I do this for a number of reasons, but one of them is what you're going to see here, which is that when I take it out, I know where to put it, and I know that I can just roll it straight back and it will be in the right position with the door at the front. I've done a whole video on how to roll up your tent and why, and if you think that's because I'm some kind of very particular person, actually you couldn't be more wrong, but it saves me work both putting it away and getting it out, and so I do it every time, and it's just as easy as putting it away any other way, to be honest. So I'll link to that here, and if you're interested in that, go have a look at that video. It's only a short one. You can also see here that I have only just pegged out the footprint very lightly. Those pegs are just holding it in place while I unfold the bell tent on top of it. Now you could absolutely peg the footprint and then your bell tent, but you know, hammering these things in is quite hard work, and the weight of the tent on top of it means that your footprint will definitely stay still once your tent's on it. So I just put them in as a temporary hold and then pull them out, put them through the bell tent D-rings and peg them down. Now, if your footprint completely matches your bell tent, you'll be able to actually peg both down at the same time. But if you've got another make footprint, then just peg your bell tent down. And as I said, the weight of your bell tent on top of it will prevent your footprint from moving. Now, you can see here that I am actually attaching the guy ropes. That's not something I do after every trip, but this is the first time this season that I put this one up. So I had removed the guy lines over the winter just to make sure that there was no damage to the canvas while it was packed away. One upgrade I've made to this tent since having it is to put carabiners on the guy lines to make it very easy to remove them when I want to. I just bought carabiners from Amazon. They're quite big, probably 10-12 centimetres, something like that. And I made sure they've got no sharp parts. Then I tie a loop like you would do attaching it to the tent, just without attaching it. And then I've added on a double loop of bungee and the carabiner. I like the bungee because it gives a little bit of slack that seems to make it more wind resistant. And then the carabiner, as I said, is there for ease of taking it on and off the tent. Next, you're going to hammer in your pegs, and my top tip here is to get a metal mallet. Forget the wooden and rubber ones, go for a proper metal one. They don't have to be a massive lump hammer, so although mine is metal, it is fairly lightweight and easy for me to use. I'm also only using one set of pegs around the edge. This tent is designed to be used with two. One that goes in the D-rings to hold the tent down, and another one to hold the bungee, which pulls the flap over the zip. And that's super important because the zip is not waterproof, so that flap keeps the rain away from the zip. For a short trip with little or no rain forecast, I just use one peg to hold both. The pegs I'm using in this video, which I bought off eBay, are ideal for that because they have a big hook over the top where you can put the bungee. They do sit proud of the ground, but this is really close to your tent, so you're not walking on this bit, and I haven't found it a problem. And in actual fact, it makes getting them out easier at the end of the trip. The next technique you're going to see is one that I have started doing, putting a bell tent up on my own. And that is, I put the A-frame in before the centre pole. I can do it the other way round, but putting the centre pole in is a lot easier if you can get air into the tent. Otherwise, it creates a vacuum. Just quickly interrupting that explanation to show you here that what I'm doing now is putting it through the hole in the top, and now look, my arm's coming out to put the cover on, and I do that to stop it slipping back inside and reducing the risk of tearing the fabric. Okay, back to explaining why I do it. So I have found that putting the A-frame in first, as I'm doing here, and very loosely pegging it out helps to create the space in the door to allow air to come into the tent as I'm putting the centre pole up. To be honest, with a 5-metre tent, I can do it either way pretty easily. Once I get to my 6-metre tent though, if I don't do this, it's really, really hard work to put the centre pole in. So this next bit isn't a tip at all, it's just the first time I've tried to video putting the centre pole in. So you get your pole and you put it into the middle of the roof, and as you can see I've got quite a lot of room to do that here because that A-frame's already in, supporting some of the tent. And then you're going to start to lift, and you're wedging the bottom against the bottom of the tent. And this is not straight yet, it's at an angle. And so I pull a little bit, then a little bit more. And especially if you haven't got the A-frame in, take the time between each pull to allow the air to come into the tent. And then you check that it's in the middle at the centre of your tent. This next step is an optional upgrade. I bought a Duopod from Canvas Camp in Europe. Although they're outside the UK because it's a low-cost item, when I brought it in, there were no import duties or VAT. So the first step for this is assembling it, and it is basically a big A-frame that is going to replace my centre pole. And now I'm going to lift it up, and what you'll see I've done here is my centre pole is actually not quite in the centre of the ceiling, and I did that on purpose for this so that I can put the Duopod into the centre. Position the outside arms and then remove the centre pole. Back on the outside, and I have been pegging out the guy lines. You might notice that my guy lines look pretty short, and that's because I'm using short guy poles. Again, I actually got mine from Canvas Camp, but you can get them at other places. And they need to be the same height roughly of your walls. So these are 60 centimetre walls, and I've got 60 centimetre short guy poles. So I peg out, I've got rebar pegs that I really like, peg out the guy lines, and then put in the short guy pole, and it enables me to have very short guy lines, but also watch what happens here when I put it into the walls of your tent are much, much more rigid very easily. So to finish off, let's show you what that looks like inside. On this trip, we decided to put the beds around the edges. That is something we always do in our 6-metre tent now, but I've never done in the 5-metre before, and I wasn't sure it would work. But we had a go, and as you can see, we've managed to fit 4 camp beds all the way round the edge. One of the reasons I really like having camp beds instead of mattresses on the floor, air mattresses, is because of all the space they have underneath. And as you can see, all of our things get tidied away. One downside to this setup we had was that the toilet is a bit front and centre here, and we'll probably adjust that next time so that you don't come into a view of the toilet. It worked practically speaking, but I'm not sure about aesthetically. It does take up all of the wall space, as you can see, but the reward for that is that we get this amazing space in the middle. And that would be the same whether you've got your duopod like I've got here. In our 6-metre, we always have a centre pole, and it still is great having space in the middle. And here's how that looked when we brought our table and chairs in at the end of the day.